You can now support Ghost Maps on Patreon. Simply look for We Are HANTU or click the link in the description. Ghost Maps. Entry 77. Jack Kim Street, Singapore. I know it's such a cliche. Beth tells me as she tears off another piece of egg prata. But man, I really miss the food in Singapore. Beth hasn't been back here in nearly 10 years. In the early 2010s, she moved to Cambridge for work, where she's currently a regional creative director at an ad agency. No small feat, considering that when she left, she was only a junior designer. I thought if I was gonna leave my family, I better make sure it was for a damn good reason, she says, while savoring her prata dipped in fish curry. As soon as she started work in Cambridge, Beth stopped taking holidays. She barely even took sick days. She delivered her best work every time and forged strong friendships with her colleagues and clients. She did everything she could to ensure that the move was worth it. And within 3 years, she was running her own team, and her career skyrocketed from there. I ask her whether there have been any downsides though, aside from missing Singaporean food, obviously. I haven't seen my family in years, she says, with a shrug that seems casual but clearly comes with a weight that she doesn't want to talk about. Not in person anyway. That's why I'm back here. But in these last few years, Beth has found herself taking stock of her life. She doesn't regret her decisions, but it also made her realize that she was finally in a position where she didn't need to sacrifice so much. So, she's back in Singapore to sort of rediscover who she was before she left. She's surrounded herself with relatives, she's enjoying local cuisine again, of course, and she's been revisiting old haunts. It's why she reached out to me, actually. My life's changed so much that I haven't thought about this incident in years, she says. The incident in question only came back to her when she tried to visit a club she once worked at, only to discover it had moved some time back. Well, back then it was located somewhere near Jack Kim Street, she says, which is as good an opportunity as any to switch on my recorder and ask her to start from the beginning. It was 2008. Beth was working part-time, manning the lights in the club. She was there pretty much every Wednesday, Friday, and Saturday, the busiest nights of the week. The sizable venue housed several rooms, each dedicated to different genres of music. Beth was stationed in the R&B room, which suited me fine, she says. I love the music and I got along with everyone else who worked there. It was precisely the kind of motivation and support that she needed. Yes, she was much younger back then. But getting home at around 4 or 5 in the morning, 3 times a week, every week, would wear down even the most enthusiastic partygoer. Let alone someone whose job was to watch the party from the sidelines. And that's why, when it first happened, I just assumed it was because of a lack of sleep, Beth says. The initial 5 months that she was working at the club, Beth didn't experience anything out of the ordinary. After those 5 months, however, she began to notice something odd. The lift doors at her flat would suddenly jam up every night when she returned home. Like something standing in between the doors to prevent them from closing. I didn't think much of it at first, she says. It probably needed servicing, I reasoned. But then the light in the lift started to flicker. And when it did, I could have sworn that there was someone else in there with me. Whatever that presence was, it soon grew bolder. On one Friday night, as Beth alighted at her floor, that presence followed her out. All along the corridor, the fluorescent lights behind her would flicker. Beth turned around to see if there was anything there. For a split second, right before one of the lights flickered back on, she saw it. A figure. She couldn't tell if it was a man or a woman, but it was certainly humanoid. But it seemed to be crawling in a very awkward manner, like some kind of insect. Beth made a dash for her home, shaking off her sleepiness and sprinting straight for her front door. She managed to outrun the figure, the creature. But as she fumbled for her keys at her gate, it seemed like the flickering lights and the creature hidden in those flashes of darkness were growing faster. Panic gripped her. She started to cry, to whimper, to plead for help from whatever higher power would listen. When the flickering lights was just 3 lights away from her, Beth managed to unlock her gate and door. She practically fell inside her home, then slammed the door shut. Panting and gasping, she waited to see if the creature would find its way in. And that's where her mother and sister found her later that morning, wide awake and still terrified. I've been staying at that flat with my mom and sis for years. Nothing of the sort had happened before, Beth tells me. I even asked them if they had experienced anything like that, but they both looked at me like I was losing my mind. Beth needed answers, needed some way to ensure that whatever was chasing her that night would never catch up to her. She would get her answers, but from a surprising source. Ramesh DJ'd in the R&B room every Wednesday. Even though they had only known each other for a couple of months, Beth and him got along like old friends. They bonded first over smoke breaks, but soon became each other's default dinner kaki. Outside of her family, Ramesh was even the first person Beth confided in about her lofty career goals and dreams, which was why it was so unnerving for her when on the Wednesday after her incident, she noticed him glaring worriedly. Not at her, but in her direction. Beth caught Ramesh on his smoke break and asked him what was wrong. He brushed it off at first. He must have had too many drinks that night, he told her. But she knew him too well, and could tell that he didn't believe that. She pushed him to give her the real reason, and reluctantly, he did. "I saw something behind you," he said. Beth tells me that his description matched that creature perfectly. Not only that though, but it reminded him of something one of the security guys had said. She continues. The security guard's name was Jay. Jay had been working at the club for about a year at that point. In mid-2007, something had gone missing during the day. Nothing of consequence, but the managers were, of course, sticklers for even the smallest of items. So, they asked Jay to take a look at the security footage from the night before to see if he could find out what happened. While scanning the security footage, however, Jay saw something on the dance floor, weaving in and out of the crowds. A figure crawling like an insect. Footage back then wasn't as high def as it is now, so at first he didn't pay any attention to it, Beth says. But after watching enough of the footage, Jay couldn't deny that there was something there. The creature made its way all along the dance floor, but it eventually settled in one spot of the club, Beth tells me, her voice shaking just a little as she recalls this. The creature made its way all along the dance floor, but it eventually settled in one spot of the club, Beth tells me, her voice shaking just a little as she recalls this. Right behind her lights. The building that housed the club was old, Beth tells me. It probably has a storied history. Lots of good times, obviously, but at some point, something bad must have happened there. Beth pleaded with her manager to move her, not just to another station, but to another room entirely. Her manager said no at first, and even chastised Ramesh for scaring Beth. But Beth was insistent, and eventually, her manager relented. I never had any problems after that, she tells me, her tone lightening back up as she orders herself a kopi. Nothing bothered me at the club and nothing followed me back home. Still, not long after, Beth quit her job as a light jockey and started working on her career as a designer. She tells me that she's glad she remembered this incident, even if it was terrifying at the time. It's not the incident itself that matters, she says, but it's just a very, very stark reminder to look back and take into account all of my history, the good and the bad. If you want to discover more of Southeast Asia's other side, subscribe now and follow us on social media. You can also be one of our supporters on Patreon. Look for We Are HANTU or click the links in the description. Ghost Maps is a HANTU production, created by Kyle Ong and Wayne Ray, with art direction by Jolene Lim, and recorded on Audio Technica mics.